Philip Reiswig grew up in Russia. His parents had immigrated from Germany then they went through Odessa in the southern part of Russia, and then the Crimea area. Well, they had been there many years, but things were not being very good for Christians at that time, and so he immigrated over to the United States, and he was able to homestead land in the Dakotas. That's where I grew up. That's where my grandparents immigrated to. Well, this man's name is Philip Reiswig. He really did enjoy Dakota, and he was a good Christian. He was able to worship like he wanted to. But pretty soon there were some meetings in the area that he started going and visiting, and he learned more and more wonderful things. He found out that he needed to go to church on Sabbath and all kinds of new things. Then here James White, this was back in 1863. James White came through there, and at Sioux Falls, they had a camp meeting, and Elder White and Elder Conradi came, and they had all this literature in German, in the German language. Reiswig thought, if only my people in Russia, my relatives, if only they could hear this, they could learn more about God. He went to Mr. Conradi and says, I want to go as a missionary. Well, but when he said, I want to go as a missionary, he didn't just say it like that. He says, you know what he had? He had a speech impediment. He stuttered just terribly. And Elder Conradi says, oh, no, you're 67 years old. You stutter. Do you have money for the trip? He said, no, not really. And your eyesight, it looks like you're not doing too well in your reading. He said, well, I can see far in a little bit. He said, I've just got to go. Well, Elder Conradi said, no, let the younger people do it. You go home and work on your homestead. Well, Philip Reiswig bought as much of that German literature as he could. And then he went home and he started selling things. And he had enough money for a trip to take him back to Russia. He loaded several bags of these pamphlets. He bought himself one pair of really, really good boots. Then he had an older pair. But the good boots he knew he needed for the cold weather. When he got to Odessa, he didn't have enough money to go up to the Crimea area. So he sold his gold book, his new boots, and he thought, I can wear my old boots up there. And he went into the marketplaces. Here he was, back where he had started out. Now, how do I reach the people? He would go into the marketplace, and he'd kind of sidle up to someone, and they could see he couldn't read well, and he told them, asked him to read it. Well, when he opened his mouth and started talking, they figured out that he had a real hard time talking, and so they would read. They would read one text, then he'd turn to another, and they'd read more and more of the pamphlet, and they in turn got so interested. They were just thrilled. And then if they really liked it, he sent that home with them. You see, the church of Russia would not allow people to go out and preach. But this guy, he was old, he couldn't see well, he couldn't talk well, What kind of a threat was he? He just went from place to place to place, asking them to read the material to him because his eyesight was so poor. Within 3 years, there was a church of 30 people. So he sent word home to the United States, Elder Conradi. Would you please come and baptize? We have enough to start a new church. Elder Conradi said that he never said no to anybody else again. Now, I'm sure, after I read this story, I thought to myself, when I have an excuse, I need to think of Philip Reiswig, because I can see pretty good. I can talk a little bit. And we can share with all of those about us. Okay, go back to your seats.